The Fort Liberty Band was midway through a Sousa march. When Marcus Holt leaned toward Major General Carver, he pointed in my direction and said something that made the general look up. I was standing at the edge of the crowd, 40 feet behind the designated family section. I was in a gray fleece jacket I had owned since before the Iraq surge. I had positioned myself near the tree line, the way I had always positioned myself near exits. Not out of anxiety, just habit. Old training. You find the perimeter. You face the door. You account for the space. What Holt said to the general, I would learn later from Master Sergeant Elkins, who was standing close enough to hear. He said, "Sir, I apologize. I am not sure how she got back here. Looks like one of the civilian guests wandered into the wrong section. I will have someone move her." And the general looked up, and the band kept playing. And Titan, 106 pounds of German Shepherd, decorated military working dog, was being walked 30 feet away. He was the most decorated canine in the unit's history. He had been walking in perfect heel for 14 minutes. The kind of discipline that only comes from thousands of hours of work, from a bond built slowly and tested hard. And then he stopped. If you have ever seen a military working dog break a stay mid-demonstration, in front of 300 people, you know the silence that follows. If you haven't, stay with me, because what happened in the next 90 seconds is the reason I finally decided to tell this story. After 6 years of not telling it, to understand it, I need to take you back to November 2018. My name is Dana Mercer. I am 51 years old. I live in a rental house on the west side of Fayetteville, North Carolina. I am 12 minutes from the gate of a base. I spent the better part of my adult life working in and out of. My neighbor, Mrs. Alderton, is 73 and brings me tomatoes from her garden in the summer. She thinks I work in government consulting, which is accurate the way a weather report is accurate. It describes the surface and tells you nothing about the pressure system underneath. I drive a 2017 Subaru Forester with 94,000 miles on it, and a dent in the rear quarter panel. It is from a parking garage in Reston, Virginia, that I have not bothered to fix. My left knee clicks on stairs. It has clicked on stairs since the winter of 2018. I have made my peace with it. The way you make peace with anything that cannot be undone. You stop expecting it to be otherwise. And eventually, you stop noticing. I am a colonel in the United States Army. I have been one for 4 years, though most of the people who know me do not know that. I work in Army intelligence, which is a community that runs on the fuel of not being discussed, especially in rooms where it should not be discussed. And I have spent 23 years practicing exactly that. The woman who runs the dry cleaner 2 blocks from my house once asked me if I was a nurse. It was because of the way I spoke to someone on the phone. Calm and clipped, organized into numbered steps. I told her I used to work in an office. She nodded. I drive away every time. I let them believe it. This is not modesty. I want to be precise about that, because the distinction matters and I have had years to think about it. Modesty is a performance of smallness. What I have is something else. A preference for taking up exactly the space required, and no more. This is something they teach you early in intelligence work, and which, after 2 decades, becomes the shape of your face. You do not perform smallness. You simply move through rooms the way water moves through rock, finding the path of least resistance, leaving no surface mark, accomplishing everything below the visible level. There is one thing I carry that I have never been able to explain away as operational habit. It is a small rectangle of navy fabric, 1 inch by 2, cut from the working vest Titan wore on November 14th, 2018. The vest was a total loss. The patch was the only part of it I kept. I do not know why I kept it. I have kept it in my wallet for 6 years, between a medical card I never use and a library card. It was for a branch I moved away from. I have never shown it to anyone. I take it out sometimes when I cannot sleep and hold it in my palm, until the rough edge of the Velcro on one side is the only thing in the room. I had not attended a unit ceremony in 14 months, I had been between assignments, the polite phrase for the administrative pause that follows a classified deployment. This happens when the paperwork has not yet caught up with the person. I was not, technically, attached to anything. I existed, for a period of several weeks, in the gap between what I had been doing and what I would do next. I had time. I had a bad knee and a quiet house and time. The ceremony program arrived in my mailbox on a Thursday, forwarded from my old APO box at the post. It was the kind of document that gets sent to veterans and former unit members as a matter of courtesy. A 2-sided cardstock flyer. Annual Commendation Parade. Fort Liberty. The unit designation I recognized. The date. And at the bottom, in smaller typeface under the section titled Special Honorees, Titan, MWD, German Shepherd, 2013 to present. Decorated in recognition of 34 confirmed IED detections, Operation Vanguard Reach, and exemplary service. This was to the 75th Ranger Regiment support elements in attendance. I set the program down on my kitchen table. I drove past the ceremony site twice in 2 days without stopping. The third day, I went inside. I had known Marcus Holt for 9 years. I had, in fact, made him. That is not a comfortable thing to write down, and I am going to write it anyway, because the truth of it is the only thing that makes the rest of this story make sense. He came to me in 2015 as a major, bright, analytical. He was the kind of officer who understood patterns in data, the way some people understand music. Instinctively, without having to be taught to hear it. He had good tactical instincts and a gift for briefing, clean slides, confident delivery. He had the ability to hold a general's attention and make complexity feel manageable. He was, in those years, one of the best S2 officers I had worked with. He was also a man who had a particular way of adjusting his volume when I entered a room. It was not something I could have cited in a fitness report. It was not anything you could hold up to the light. It was the way a conversation rearranged itself when I walked in. The way men who had been leaning toward him straightened up and looked at me with a brief recalibration. The involuntary reaction of people deciding where I fit. And the way Holt, almost without knowing he was doing it, would widen his stance and speak a little louder, as though filling a space I had claimed, just by walking into it. I noticed it the first time and said nothing. After the third time, I decided that noting something and addressing something were two different categories of effort. Some things cost more to address than to simply account for. I filed it and moved on. That is a sentence I have typed in my head many times. I filed it and moved on. I could fill a building with what I have filed and moved on from. What I should tell you about Operation Hollow Crown is almost nothing, because almost nothing about it is releasable. What I can tell you is that I designed it over the course of 14 months, working from a secure facility in a building that does not appear on any public map. I built the intelligence framework. This was for a sustained counter-network operation that would ultimately be cited in classified after-action reports. It was noted as one of the more effective operations of its kind in that theater in that period. I handed the execution to a team that included Marcus Holt. He executed it well. I want to be fair about that, because fairness costs something in a story like this. And I believe in paying what things cost. The decisions he made in the field, the adaptations he managed under pressure, they were good work. The foundation he was working from was mine, but the man who stood on it performed. The problem with intelligence work is that the foundation is invisible. You can point to a building and say, a man built it. You cannot point to the structural analysis that told you where to dig. The analysis disappears into the building. The building gets the plaque. Holt got the plaque. I had not been in the room when that happened, because I had been in a different country at the time. I was working a follow-on operation that I am also not able to describe. By the time I came home, the unit had filed its commendation recommendations. His name was on them. Mine was not, because mine was attached to a document that could not be cited publicly. not without compromising things that were still active. I signed the paperwork that made his recommendation possible. He did not know that. There was a debrief 8 months later. A video conference between the unit at Fort Liberty and the analysts at Meade who had supported the operation. I was on the Meade side of the call. Holt was presenting from Fort Liberty, walking the room through the campaign results with a set of slides. I recognized them because the architecture of the analysis was mine. The same framework, the same segmentation logic, the same geographic layering I had built over 14 months. He did not say my name once in 40 minutes. Not because he had made a decision to exclude me. I do not think he had made a decision at all. I think the slides had been his for long enough, that he had stopped tracking where they came from. It is the way you stop tracking where a word came from, once it enters your vocabulary. He had internalized the architecture. He presented it as the architecture of his thinking. I watched from the Meade side, and took notes on the questions he answered well and the questions he deflected. And I filed the conversation in the same place I file everything I have noted and moved on from. I did not correct him. I have never found correcting people in the moment to be as useful as letting them finish. I want to be honest about what I did with this, because honesty is what this whole story demands. The numbers were clean. The numbers had always been clean. Credit is not the currency of classified work. The work is the currency. The outcomes are the currency. And I put what did not fit into that accounting somewhere else, on a high shelf, and did not look at it. I knew the numbers. Knowing the numbers had always been enough. This is what the numbers look like when I lay them out in order, which I have done in my head more times than I can count. 14 months of analysis. 1 operation, 34 confirmed IED detections. 41 total clearances. 16 personnel who came home, because the ground was safe enough to walk on. 1 staff sergeant, 27 years old, from Harlan, Kentucky. 1 military working dog, 4 years old, from a breeding program in the Netherlands. He had never met Kevin Marsh before that deployment, and he would spend the rest of his life looking for him. The numbers are the thing I know how to carry. They are clean and fixed, and they do not change on bad nights. What happened to the people inside the numbers is different, and harder. And mine, what I had not accounted for, was Titan. Titan had been attached to the unit as part of an integrated support package. 1 military working dog and his handler. They were assigned to route clearance and facility search during the operational period. His handler was a staff sergeant named Kevin Marsh, 27 years old, from Harlan, Kentucky. Kevin was a man who spoke to his dog the way some men speak to their children. A low, constant conversation. It moved between affection and instruction, without distinguishing between them. Kevin had a particular phrase he used when Titan completed a detection. He would crouch down to the dog's level and say, very quietly, "Good work, partner. Not good boy, not heel. Just, good work, partner." As though they were 2 professionals who had both done their jobs, and they were taking a moment to acknowledge it. I heard him say it 41 times. I counted without meaning to. It became a kind of marker for me. The way some people mark time by coffee cups or cigarettes. Each, good work, partner, was a device found, a path cleared, a column of men who got to keep walking. Kevin Marsh died on the night of November 14th, 2018, on a road outside a town I am not going to name. It happened during an exfil that was compromised by a source that had been turned. He was 37 steps ahead of me. When the vehicle at the front of the column was hit, and 8 steps back from that point, when the secondary caught the intersection. Titan was at his side. The blast threw the dog 15 feet. I want to tell this part correctly, which means I have to tell it slowly. After the explosion, there was a period that my memory stores as longer than it was. The world reorganized itself, from fire and noise, into a series of problems that required immediate action. I have been trained to do this, to take the overwhelming thing and break it into the next step, and then the next. The training works. It is not the same as feeling nothing. It is the same as being able to feel it later. In installments. In the dark. For years, Kevin was beyond what I could do for him. I understood that in the first seconds. In the flat, clinical way the mind delivers certain information under load. There is no decision in that moment. You understand, and you move. Titan was alive. He was down in the dirt 30 feet from the impact point, his hindquarters not tracking. One shoulder was open and bleeding, in a way that told me the shrapnel had gone deep. He was trying to drag himself toward the place where Kevin had been, making a sound I have heard exactly once in my life. I will not describe it here, because some things earn the dignity of not being described. The helicopter was 4 minutes out. We had one secure position 20 meters north. The trained thing, the thing that the manual and the risk calculus both endorsed, was to move to the position, treat the human casualties, list Titan as a combat loss, and recover him if the situation permitted later. I was already moving toward the dog, before I finished the sentence in my head. I got to him. I packed the shoulder with what I had. I got a wrap on the hindquarters that slowed the bleeding without stopping it, and then I did the thing that nobody in the after-action report ever quite understood. I have never been able to fully explain it in a way that satisfies people who were not there. I told the crew chief to take the dog first. First, he said. First. He is the heaviest bleed and the longest stabilization window. Move. He moved. They took Titan. They came back for me. The 4 minutes between those two events were the longest 4 minutes of my life, and they are mine to keep. My left knee took a piece of the secondary device, that the darkness and the distance had partially absorbed. I did not know that until the flight out, when the medic found it with her hands. She found it in a way that made me understand why people use the word discovery for some kinds of pain. Titan was in the front of the bird. I could see him from where I was sitting. Every time his chest moved, I counted it. He survived. The record shows he was returned to service after a 12-week rehabilitation period and went on to complete 3 additional deployments. This was before his formal retirement in 2022. Kevin Marsh's name is on a wall at Fort Liberty. I have visited it twice, alone, on weekday mornings when it is quiet, and when I do not have to share the silence with anyone. What I had not known, until I read that ceremony program at my kitchen table on a Thursday evening, was that Titan would be there. That someone had arranged to bring him back, retired, gray-muzzled at 10 years old, to stand one more time in formation with the unit that had been his. That was the reason I got in the car. I sat with the program for 2 evenings, before I made a decision I could commit to. The difficulty was not the ceremony itself. I have attended more ceremonies than I could count, in uniforms that announced me before I opened my mouth. I have been in rooms where the protocol was clear and the hierarchy was visible. That kind of ceremony is easy. You are assigned a place. You go to it. This was different because I had not been assigned a place. I was a former unit affiliate, peripherally connected by a record that most people in that formation had never been cleared to read. I could go or not go, and the ceremony would proceed identically. No one was waiting on me. The practical argument for not going was simple and complete. But Titan would be there. I thought about Kevin Marsh's phrase, "Good work, partner." I thought about the dog trying to drag himself back toward the place where his person had been. I thought about 34 devices and the columns of men who walked through the cleared ground afterward, and they did not think about what they were walking over. I reached into my wallet without thinking. The patch was there, the way it had always been there, worn soft at the edges now, the small square of navy fabric I had carried for 6 years. Without a reason I could name. I held it for a moment in the kitchen light. Then I put it back and picked up my keys. I picked up the phone and called Patricia No. Patricia had been my executive officer for 2 of the years that mattered most, before she transitioned out. She went to work for a consulting firm in McLean that does things she also cannot describe at dinner parties. She is meticulous and direct, and she laughs at the precise moment something is funny, which is rarer than it sounds. "You saw the program," she said, before I had finished my first sentence. "Titan's listed." "I know. I got one too. A pause. You're going. It was not a question. Civilian clothes, I said. There was a longer pause. Patricia understands the taxonomy of my decisions well enough to know what that means. Dana. Her voice had shifted to the register she uses for things that require precision. You know who is presenting the unit commendation. Carver, I said. I saw the program. He has been trying to find you for 3 years. I know. And you're going in a fleece jacket. Gray, I said. She was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone deciding not to spend any more words on a decision already made. Okay, she said finally. You know what you're doing. I always have, I said. She let it go. Patricia has always known when I have made up my mind, and she has always known that letting me proceed in my own way costs less than an argument. An argument I am not going to lose. She disagreed with me. She always disagrees with me when I choose invisibility over presence. She is also right more often than I would like, and I would not tell her so because she already knows. I put on the gray fleece jacket. I drove to Fort Liberty. I was up at 5, which is an hour earlier than I needed to be. I made coffee the way I always make coffee, 4 minutes steep. Black, in the cup I have used every morning since Reston. It is the right size and weight, and I have not found a reason to replace it. I stood at the kitchen window with the cup in both hands and watched the streetlight at the corner go through its last cycle. This was right before the sky started to change. Mrs. Alderton's porch light was on. It is always on. She leaves it on for a cat that died 3 years ago, and she has never mentioned it, and I have never asked. I did not review the ceremony program again. I had read it enough times that I could have recited the order of events from memory. This is not a skill I was trying to develop. I just stood at the window and let the morning be what it was. At 6:45, I put on the gray fleece jacket and drove to Fort Liberty. The fog had come in off the Cape Fear overnight and was still sitting low on the parade ground when I arrived. It was the particular dense fog of a North Carolina November that makes everything look like a photograph that hasn't quite developed. The bleachers were filling. The formation was assembling at the north end, shapes in dress blue emerging from the gray. I found my position near the tree line and waited for the fog to lift. It didn't lift fully until the band started playing. I thought about that later, how the whole morning had been obscured, and then the music started, and the light came through. The ceremony was set up on the main parade ground behind the headquarters building, a wide stretch of asphalt and tamped grass. I had crossed it at least 200 times over the years, always in uniform, always with a purpose and a direction, and a name that opened certain doors. I walked across it now in civilian clothes, and was anonymous in the way that civilian clothes make you anonymous, especially on a military installation, which is completely. A woman in a gray jacket and khaki pants is invisible on a parade ground. She is someone's wife, someone's parent, the contractor from the local firm who got her access badge mixed up with a visitor pass. She is not a problem. She is furniture. I have always found this useful. I found a position in the standing section behind the family seating, angled slightly off the main axis of the formation. This gave me a clean sightline to the parade route and to the reviewing stand, without putting me directly in anyone's eye line. My left knee had been talking since the drive over, and it was talking louder now, the way it always does on cold asphalt. I shifted my weight to the right without thinking about it. 20 years of compensating for that knee had made it automatic. The band was good. Fort Liberty has always had a good band. They were working through a program of march music. And I let it settle around me the way you let weather settle. Not ignoring it, just receiving it without needing to respond. I saw Holt 20 minutes in. He was working the VIP area near the reviewing stand. With the comfortable ease of a man who has learned to inhabit formal spaces, he acted as though he owns them. He had made lieutenant colonel 18 months ago. I had seen the promotion notice through a shared distribution channel. 3 sentences. Unremarkable. He was in his dress blues. Every button correct. And he was smiling, in a directed, calibrated way. The look of someone who understands that being seen smiling at important people is itself a form of currency. His wife, Kara. I had met her once at a unit function in 2017. She was a woman with excellent posture and the specific social precision of someone who has spent years reading rooms for her husband. She was leaning slightly toward him as he worked the crowd. I watched her twice touch his arm at exactly the right moment to redirect him toward the general's aide, who mattered, and away from the supply officer, who didn't. She was not performing. She was working. She had a better read of the room than Marcus did. And she had probably always had a better read. That understanding traveled from my eye to my brain and filed itself without comment. I do not know what Kara Holt knew about Hollow Crown. I do not know what a husband tells a wife when the citation comes in with his name on it, especially when the architecture belongs to someone else. I have thought about it. I have decided it is not the question that matters most. He saw me at the 40-minute mark. I watched it happen. He was coming back from a conversation near the reviewing stand when his eyes moved across the crowd. It was the scanning pattern that senior officers develop, not focused attention, just inventory. The persistent habit of accounting for a space. His gaze passed over me and kept moving, and then stopped and came back. I did not look away. I have never found looking away to be useful. He studied me for a moment with the particular expression of a man trying to place someone he thinks he has met in a different context. Then something settled in his face, not recognition exactly, but classification. He had filed me in a category. I could see him doing it. The category was civilian, standing in the wrong section. Not important. Someone else's problem. He turned back to his conversation. I watched him do it and noted the ease of it, the way a man moves on from something he has already resolved. I would think about that ease later, about how much energy it takes to be that certain, that fast. The band shifted into the march that precedes the formal entry of the color guard. The crowd organized itself into the particular attentiveness of people who have been waiting for the main event. The formation entered from the north end of the parade ground, and Titan was near the middle of it. He was being walked by a young staff sergeant, Elkins. I would learn later, his handler for the past 2 years. Elkins had come up through the working dog program at Lackland, and had, by all accounts, done right by an old dog. This was in the final chapter of his working life. Titan moved with the measured cadence of a dog who has done this many times. Not the high-energy drive of a young animal in the field, but something more considered. A professional at the end of a long career who still shows up correctly, because showing up correctly is not a thing he knows how to stop doing. He was gray at the muzzle and gray along his ears. The ceremonial vest he wore deep navy, embroidered with the unit insignia, and his service record sat on his body. The panel was attached, on a body that was still broad through the shoulders despite the years. He moved with a slight stiffness in his right hind that I recognized, and that cost me something to see. And I did not allow it to show. I had not expected, standing in that crowd, to feel the particular thing I felt when he came into view. I had prepared for a lot of things about the morning. I had not prepared for how much it would cost me. To simply see him walking and healthy and old, and to think about the night I was not certain he would be any of those things. He was beautiful. That is the word, and I am going to use it. I had not seen him in 6 years. That was the last thing I expected correctly for the next 2 hours. Holt had moved back toward the reviewing stand, and was standing near Major General Carver when the formation reached the midpoint. I was watching Titan. I was not watching Holt. I was watching the dog work through the ceremony, with the dignity of an animal that has earned every inch of ground, every inch he occupies. And I was thinking about Kevin Marsh's phrase, and I was not doing anything visible with my face. Titan had drawn even with my position on the route, 20 feet away, walking in heel, eyes forward, and then his head turned. It turned the way a dog's head turns when something overrides everything else. Not the distracted flick of an ear toward a sound, but the full rotation of the skull. The sudden reorientation of every sense toward a single fixed point. His handler kept walking for 2 more steps before he registered that the dog was no longer beside him. Titan had stopped. He was looking at me. I have stood still in a lot of difficult situations. I have held position in places where moving would have ended things. I have maintained my composure in rooms where every person watching expected me to lose it. I have never worked harder to hold my face still than I did in the 4 seconds. The moments between the time Titan stopped and the moment he moved toward me. He did not run. He was 10 years old and his right hind was compromised, and he did not run. He walked with deliberate purpose, and the leash came taut, and Elkins stumbled. And then the leash was hanging. Because Elkins had had the presence of mind to drop it, he chose that rather than be dragged sideways across the parade ground. And Titan walked through the formation, one handler stepping aside, another moving his dog to give him room. And he walked off the parade route and into the standing area and through the crowd. They parted around him without fully understanding why. The way crowds always part for something that moves with certainty. He came to me. He walked to my left side and stopped and leaned. Not the dramatic throw of a young animal, the considered, deliberate lean of a dog that has found what it was looking for and is confirming the finding. He pressed his shoulder against my leg and held it there. And then he turned his head up and looked at me. I put my hand down without deciding to. I found the top of his skull under my palm, the shape of it. The small notch at the base of his left ear, where the fur had never grown back correctly after the dressing. The field dressing in 2018. I had put that dressing on. My hands had been on this dog's head in a ditch in the dark, on the worst night of both our lives. And now they were here. On a cold November morning in the open light, and he was old and gray and leaning against my leg. The band had stopped. I did not notice the band had stopped until the silence was already full. The formation had lost its shape. The crowd had turned. 300 people were looking at the woman in the gray fleece jacket, with the decorated military working dog pressed against her leg, and not one of them made a sound. Elkins was standing 8 feet away with the dropped leash in his hand. He had an expression on his face that I can only describe. As a young man realizing he is inside a moment that he does not have the context to understand. I heard, from the direction of the reviewing stand, the sound of footsteps on wooden platform steps. Not one set of footsteps. One. Major General William Carver was coming down from the reviewing stand. He came down the 4 steps from the platform to the ground. With the unhurried authority of a man, someone who has taken charge of enough situations that taking charge has become indistinguishable from breathing. He was in his dress uniform, the silver stars on his shoulders catching the morning light. He walked across the parade ground toward me with every person present watching him do it. And when he reached me, he stopped. He looked at Titan against my leg. He looked at my face. And then Major General William Carver came to attention and raised his right hand in a salute. He did not speak. He did not explain. He simply saluted. Here's the thing about a salute from a major general, directed at a specific person. In front of military personnel, 300 personnel, it does not require narration. Everyone present understood exactly what it meant, and exactly what it meant about the person receiving it. You do not have to announce a rank to a room full of people who understand rank. The gesture does the announcing. I returned it. I brought my right hand up to the edge of my temple, and I held it there for the correct duration, and I dropped it cleanly. In the 2 seconds of silence that followed, I heard Marcus Holt's voice, very close behind me. He said something to his wife that I did not catch, and then I heard Kara Holt make a sound small, involuntary. The sound of a person who has just understood something that changes the entire shape of what they thought they knew. The specific sound of a calculation being revised at speed, of a room that was supposed to hold one thing, a space turning out to hold something entirely different. I turned and looked at him. Marcus Holt had gone the color of the parade ground asphalt. His wife's hand was on his arm and she was looking at him, and he was looking at me. And the calculation happening behind his eyes was visible in a way I suspect he would have found mortifying if he'd been capable of feeling anything in that moment, beyond the initial blast of it. He had pointed me out to the general less than 15 minutes ago. He had leaned toward Major General Carver and told him a civilian had wandered into the wrong section, and the general had come down off the reviewing stand and saluted. The sergeant major of the unit, a man named Broderick, 32 years in, came up to stand beside the general. He had a chest full of service ribbons. I could have read like a timeline of recent military history. American history. He had been at the front of the formation. He looked at me, and then at Holt, and then at me again, doing the arithmetic quietly. Arriving at the answer, his face confirmed. "Colonel Mercer," he said. Not loud. He didn't need to be. Then, quieter still. Almost to himself, Wraith. He said the call sign, the way you say a word you thought you'd retired as confirmation, not introduction, the way a man who has been carrying a name for 6 years finally sets it down in the right place. General Carver turned to look at Holt, and the look on his face was not anger. It was something harder to carry than anger. It was the specific expression of a very senior officer who has just understood the full shape of a situation, an event that unfolded on his watch, and who will be asking careful questions when this ceremony is concluded, and who is at this moment choosing to let those questions wait, exactly long enough to handle the immediate matter. To handle it correctly. He turned back to me. "Colonel Mercer," he said, "I have been trying to get your forwarding address for 3 years. I know. Sir, you're harder to find than most people I send satellites after. That's been intentional," I said. Something moved across his face that might have been, very briefly, a smile. "Walk with me," he said. Holt came to me an hour later. The ceremony had resumed after a pause of several minutes, during which the band recollected itself, and the formation recollected itself. The crowd recollected itself, and Titan was walked back to his designated position by Elkins. He handled the whole thing with a professionalism I respected. The old dog went without protest. He had done what he came to do. I had spoken with General Carver for 20 minutes in the space behind the reviewing stand. We spoke in the particular direct privacy of 2 people talking seriously. While 300 people pretend not to be watching, he asked questions that were careful and specific, and that told me he had been briefed on certain things, matters I had believed were more tightly controlled than they were. I answered what I could, and told him clearly what I could not. And he nodded in the way of a man who has spent a career learning to read the shape of what isn't being said. At the end of it, he looked at me with an expression that cost him something to wear, and said, What you did in November of 2018 was cited in a classified after-action that I read in 2019, by name. I have been carrying that name around for 3 years, trying to put a face on it. I would have liked to do that sooner. You have the face now, sir, I said. He looked at me for a moment. Then, take the instructor billet, Colonel. It's been held open. I had known about the instructor billet. There had been emails forwarded through 3 different channels over 2 years, each one a slightly more formal version of the previous one's request. I had declined them all with language that was professional and complete. It was designed to close the conversation without leaving a door. Yes, sir, I said. He nodded and left. Holt found me near the parking area as the crowd dispersed. He had lost the practiced ease of the VIP reception. He was walking with a tightness. I recognized the particular muscular tension of a man trying to hold himself, in a posture he has not yet earned back. Kara was not with him. He stopped in front of me and looked at my face and not at my chest, which was the correct thing to do. My chest had nothing on it. I was in civilian clothes. There was nothing to look at. He had to meet my eyes, and meeting my eyes was the harder thing, and I respected that he made himself do it. Ma'am, he said. I waited. I said something to the general that I need to own. I didn't know he stopped. Reorganized. The way people reorganize when the sentence they started is not the sentence they should be finishing. I need to apologize for what I said. You told him I was a civilian who wandered in. I said, not an accusation. A statement of record. Yes, ma'am, you believed that. Yes, you have worked in this building for 4 years, I said. You have been in this unit for 4 years. You have received a commendation for a campaign that I architected, from the ground level up. And you saw a small woman in a gray jacket standing in the wrong section. And you decided, in the time it took to lean sideways and open your mouth, that you knew who she was, and what she was doing there. He did not answer. There was nothing to say to that. It was not a question. That's the thing you need to sit with, I said. Not the apology to me. I accept it. We can both move on from it. And we will. The thing you need to carry is the decision itself. How fast you made it. How certain you were. I looked at him without looking away. You are good at your job. You have always been good at your job. I know that better than most, and I mean it as a fact, not a consolation prize. And you still looked at a woman in a fleece jacket and filed her in 4 seconds without a second thought. He was quiet. His jaw worked. He was not a cruel man. That was the thing I had spent 6 years misunderstanding. Cruel men decide to harm. Holt had never decided anything. He had simply never bothered to look, not at me, not at the slides, not at the name that was supposed to be there. The absence of cruelty is not the same thing as the presence of care. I had learned that slowly, and I was going to let him learn it on his own schedule. How do I fix it? He said. You don't fix it, I said. You carry it. And the next time you're in a room, and you look at someone, and your brain has already decided they don't belong there, you wait. You slow down. You ask a question instead of making a call. That's the whole price. That's what you owe. Not me. I held the pause. The next one. He came to attention. Crisp. Complete. A beat too late and entirely sincere. I returned it. I let him leave first. Elkins caught me near the gate with Titan on a loose leash beside him. The old dog came up to me immediately, and I crouched down, my knee sending a sharp word up through my thigh that I noted and set aside. And I took his gray head in both hands, the notch in his left ear, the silver scar along the right shoulder that I had packed with field gauze on a road in the dark in 2018, with my hands shaking from adrenaline. I had not allowed myself to acknowledge it. Until well after the helicopter landed. The same dog, 10 years old and still broad through the chest, looking at me with a calm, certain expression. The look of an animal that has done its work and knows it. Hey, old man, I said. He pushed his forehead against my chin and held it there. Good work, partner, I said. It was the first time I had said it out loud. I had carried it in my head for 6 years, Kevin's phrase, his specific cadence. The way it sounded in the dark before a movement, when the whole column was holding its breath. Saying it out loud cost me something I had not expected to pay, and I paid it in the only way available, which was to stay crouched on the cold asphalt, with my hands on the dog's face. Until the payment was complete, Elkins was watching. He had the careful, respectful stillness of a young non-commissioned officer. An officer who understands that some things happening in front of him are not his to interrupt. He's never done that, he said. When I finally stood, not with anyone. I've had him 2 years. He has never broken a stay for anything, not treats, not other dogs. Not the vet, when she comes with the needle. Not for anything. He made a promise a long time ago, I said. That's all that was. He was keeping it. Elkins looked at the dog and then at me. He was 24. From Baton Rouge, Louisiana, first in his family to enlist. 3 years into a working dog career he had wanted since he was 9 years old. Since he watched a military working dog demonstration at a county fair. He had written to the program. They had written back. He was the kind of young man who writes letters and waits for answers, which is rarer than it should be. Were you there? In 2018. Yes, with Staff Sergeant Marsh. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at Titan, who was now sitting against my leg with his eyes half closed. "He doesn't respond to partner," Elkins said. "I tried it when I first got him, because it was in his file that Staff Sergeant Marsh used it. He just didn't respond. To me or anyone." He paused. "Until right now. I did not have an answer for that. The truth I had was not the kind that fits into a sentence in a parking lot on a cold morning. Not with a young handler trying to understand something his dog did. The truth was this: some bonds are made in language, and some are made in the space below language, and the ones below language are the ones that do not degrade." I reached into my pocket. I took out the patch, the small square of navy fabric I had been carrying for 6 years, carrying it between a library card and a medical identification, worn soft at the edges now, the Velcro on one side almost smooth. I held it in my palm for a moment, in the cold air, in the light. Then I folded it carefully and pressed it into Elkin's free hand. He looked down at it, then up at me. "That belongs with him," I said. "Not with me anymore." He closed his fingers around it and nodded, and I believed he understood what it was and what it was not, which was all I needed. "Take care of him," I said. "Let him sleep wherever he wants. That's an order." Elkins almost smiled. "He's already taken the couch." "Ma'am." "Good," I said. I scratched behind Titan's ears one last time. I stood. My knee said what it always says, and I did not answer it, and I walked to my car. I accepted the instructor billet the following Monday. I called the detailer from my kitchen table, with my coffee still hot, and my field jacket hanging over the chair, hanging in the corner, and I told him I would take it. He said yes, ma'am, with the compressed relief of a man who has been waiting 2 years. Waiting for a call he was not sure was coming. I start in February, 6 weeks after the ceremony. Holt was reassigned to a training billet at Fort Jackson. His promotion packet for colonel was withdrawn from the board. I did not ask for either of those things. I know they happened because Broderick sent me a 3-line email subject line. "For your information, I read it once and archived it. The account was not mine to close." There is something I have been trying to understand since that morning, and I think I finally have it clearly. Clearly enough to say out loud. I had believed, for 6 years, that my invisibility was a professional preference. I had dressed it in the language of security protocol and operational necessity. All of that was true, and it was also not the whole truth. The whole truth was that in November of 2018, on a road outside a town I cannot name, I had left something behind. Something I could not retrieve. Not my knee. Kevin Marsh, 27 years old with a too loud laugh and a dog he called partner. Gone in the span of 2 breaths. I had been the senior officer on that movement. I had brought everyone home except the one person I most wanted to bring home. No ceremony was ever going to fix that. What I had misunderstood was that invisibility is not the same as not asking anyone. Not asking them to confirm the gap out loud. The gap was always there. The silence around it was mine. Not Kevin's. Not Titan's. Mine. It is not enough to know the numbers. You have to say the name. I said it on the drive home. Alone. On Interstate 295. Heater running. Sun off the rearview mirror. I said Kevin Marsh's full name out loud to the empty car, the way you are supposed to say names. The names of the dead plainly. In the open. Without apology. Kevin Marsh. Staff Sergeant Kevin Marsh. Good work, partner. That was the thing the ceremony actually gave me. Not the salute. Not Holt's face. Not even Titan. Just the room to say the name. There is a thing they do in the army when they are about to ask something hard of you. They put you at parade rest, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped at the small of your back, completely still. You can breathe. Your eyes can move. But your body holds. You are present, motionless, available. And you wait. I had been at parade rest inside my own life for 6 years. A 10-year-old dog with a notch in his ear crossed 30 feet of parade ground and pressed against my leg, he said. In the only language he had, "You are known here." You just kept standing too far back for anyone to reach you. I had called it modesty. It was never modesty. Modesty is a choice. What I had been doing was a sentence I kept renewing: one more year of not being found. One more year of not standing still inside the distance. The space between the man who didn't come home and the 16 who did. Titan didn't care about any of that. He cared about a voice and a pair of hands that had held his head on the worst night of both their lives. He stored it the way animals store the things that matter, not in language, not in narrative, but in the body, in the marrow, in the part that never ages. He knew me before I knew I was ready to be known. If you have been standing at parade rest inside your own life, hear this. Carrying something true from a room no one was allowed to photograph, hear this. The good ones always know. You are allowed to be present. You are allowed to stand where you belong. Take the billet. Say the name. Walk through the gate. Parade rest ends eventually. It is supposed to. Parade rest is the position between attention and at ease. You stand still. You wait. You hold. I stood at parade rest inside my own life for 6 years, and I called it modesty. It was fear the whole time. Titan knew the difference. He always did. If this story meant something to you, I hope you'll share it with someone who may need this reminder today.